Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this session, we'll discuss about pancreas. Do you know pancreas is known as a two-in-one gland? Why is it called so? So in the end of this session, we'll see why it is known as a two-in-one gland. So where is it located? The pancreas is located in the posterior abdominal wall. You can see it is located behind the stomach. So you're not able to visualize the pancreas properly. So once you remove the stomach and see, you can see that it is extending from the duodenum on the right side to the spleen on the left side. The main parts of pancreas are head, neck, body and tail. Okay, so this is the head, this region is the neck, this is the body and this is the tail. The head corresponds to the L1 L2 vertebra. The body lies almost in the transpyloric plane, whereas tail lies opposite to the T12 vertebra. Now we'll see the parts one by one. The first is head. So you can see here, the head is clasped between the first, second and third parts of the duodenum. So this head lies within the concavity of the first, second and third part of the duodenum. And you can see an anastomotic arcade, that is the pancreatic or duodenal anastomotic arcade between the head and the duodenum. And there is a small projection that is arising from the lower part of the head, that is known as the uncinate process. Uncinate process. We learn about the relations of the head. You can see here, anterior relations are the first part of duodenum, then the transverse colon which is coming here, and then the coils of jejunum. Then the posterior relations are common bile duct and inferior vena cava. Whereas the superior relation is the first part of duodenum and the inferior relation of the head is the third part of duodenum. And now you can see the uncinate process here. The uncinate process passes behind the superior mesenteric vessels. So it arises from the lower part of the head. It is the hook-shaped process and it passes behind the superior mesenteric vessels. So you can say the uncinate process is sandwiched between the superior mesenteric vessels in front and abdominal aorta behind. Okay. So that's all about the head and the uncinate process. The neck is the connecting part between the head and the body. You can say the anterior relations are gastroduodenal artery and the pylorus of stomach. If the stomach is placed here, the pylorus will be coming in front of the neck of pancreas. And it has got a very important posterior relation, that is, behind the neck of pancreas, formation of portal vein occurs. That is, the portal vein forms by the union of the superior mesenteric vein and the splenic vein behind the neck of pancreas. So you have to remember that. Next is the body. So body, you can see it is kind of triangular, but more than triangular, you can say it is a prismoid in shape. So prismoid is somewhat like this. Okay, so you have got an anterior margin here, a superior margin here and inferior margin here. So this is the prismoid shape of the body. Anterior margin, superior margin, inferior margin. And between the anterior and superior margin you have got the anterior surface. Between the anterior and inferior margin you have got the inferior surface. And between the superior and the inferior margin, so that will be coming behind, that is posterior surface. So there are three margins for the body and three surfaces for the body. Margins are anterior, superior and inferior. Surfaces are anterior, inferior and posterior surface. So we will see the margins and surfaces one by one. The anterior margin. So anterior margin is coming like here. Anterior margin is related to transverse mesocolon. We have seen transverse colon as the anterior relation of the head. So the transverse mesocolon is related to the anterior margin of the body of pancreas. The superior margin, you can see the superior margin is here. The superior margin, you can see a small elevation that is known as tuber omentale. Tuber omentale. And this corresponds to the celiac artery. The tuber omentale corresponds to the celiac artery, and to the right of tuber omentale you have got the common hepatic artery, And to the left of tuberomendial, you have got the tortuous splenic artery that goes to the spleen. So by learning this diagram, you will be able to learn most of the relations of the pancreas. So the superior margin is having a tuberomendial more towards the right side, and it is corresponding to the celiac artery. And to the right of tuberomendial, you have got the common hepatic artery, which is arising from the celiac artery. And to the left of tuberomendial, you have got the splenic artery, which is tortuous artery. Now the inferior margin, you can see here, inferior margin is related to the superior mesenteric vessel, and also inferior mesenteric vein is related here and passes deep through this margin to reach the splenic vein. Okay, that's all about the margins of the body of pancreas. We'll see the surfaces. The surface, first surface is anterior surface. This is the anterior surface. So anterior surface is related to the stomach. So this forms a part of the stomach bed. The stomach lies on few structures. One of the structures is the anterior surface of the body of pancreas. So you can say between the anterior surface of the body of pancreas and the stomach, there is the lesser sac or the omental bursa. Next is the inferior surface. This is the inferior surface. Inferior surface is related to, since it's the inferiormost part, it is related to the duodenojejunal flexure, coils of jejunum and left colic flexure. Now the posterior surface, so you are not able to see the posterior surface, it is behind. Okay. So posterior surface has got many relations. The posterior surface is related from right to left to the abdominal aorta, left crus of diaphragm, left renal vessels, left kidney and the left suprarenal gland. And another important relation is splenic vein. The splenic vein is embedded in the posterior surface. It is embedded in the posterior surface, and this splenic vein comes out from the spleen and it reaches the neck of pancreas, where it unites with the superior mesenteric vein to form the portal vein. Okay, so that's all about the margins and surfaces of the body. Now next is the tail of pancreas. Tail, you can see it's a small region. The tail of the pancreas reaches the hilum of spleen along with the lienorenal ligament and the splenic vessels. So that's an important viva question. The tail of pancreas reaches the hilum of spleen along with the lienorenal ligament and the splenic vessels. And the importance of the tail of pancreas is that it has got islets of Langerhans. So what are these islets of Langerhans? These islets are responsible for the production of insulin and glucagon. So the importance is that since this tail forms a part of the splenic pedicle, in case of splenectomy, when you are going to tie the splenic vessels, care should be taken that the tail of pancreas should not be included in that, because if tail is included, that can lead to leakage of the pancreatic enzymes, leading to chemical peritonitis or pancreatic fistula. So the splenic pedicle should be ligated very carefully, excluding the tail of pancreas. So now we'll see the ducts of pancreas. So the pancreas has got two ducts. There is the main pancreatic duct and the accessory pancreatic duct. The main pancreatic duct is also known as duct of Wirsung. Duct of Wirsung. Whereas the accessory pancreatic duct is known as the duct of Santorini. Okay, duct of Wirsung and duct of Santorini. So the main pancreatic duct, you can see here, it arises from the tail, and as it passes towards the head, it increases in size by gathering many tributaries, and it passes in a herringbone pattern. Herringbone pattern is the pattern of arrangement of tiles. So this passes from the tail and it turns abruptly downwards, and then it passes towards the head, and then it opens into the major duodenal papilla along with the common bile duct. It forms a hepatopancreatic ambula or ambula of Vater and opens into the major duodenal papilla. There is an opening in the second part of duodenum. So it is an opening here in the second part of duodenum. So there is the accessory pancreatic duct arises from the lower part of head, and it opens into the minor duodenal papilla, which is also an opening in the interior of the second part of duodenum. So that's all about the pancreatic ducts. A word about the microscopy. Microscopy and development you will be learning in detail later. But the pancreas consists of many acinar cells and ducts, and also centroacinar cells. These acinar cells are having bipolar staining pattern. And you can see also islets of Langerhans that we have already discussed. These islets of Langerhans has got many cells, alpha cells that produce glucagon, beta cells that produce insulin, then delta cells that produce somatostatin, then some other cells are PP cells that produce pancreatic polypeptide, D1 cells that produce vasoactive intestinal peptide, and enterochromaffin cells that produce serotonin. So these are some of the cells produced by the islets of Langerhans. The main ones are the alpha and beta. Alpha cells produce the glucagon, whereas beta cells secrete the insulin. Now we see the development of the pancreas and the pancreatic duct. In the fourth week of intrauterine life, from the caudal part of the foregut, you get two buds, that is ventral pancreatic bud and dorsal pancreatic bud. So this ventral pancreatic bud arises in relation to the hepatic bud, whereas the dorsal pancreatic bud arises singly. And later rotation occurs, and after that the dorsal pancreatic bud lies above the ventral pancreatic bud. After the rotation, ventral pancreatic bud comes to lie below the dorsal pancreatic bud. And then subsequently, the duct of the dorsal pancreatic bud joins with the ventral pancreatic bud. So it will be joining like this. Okay. Now the upper part of the head, neck, body and tail are arising from the dorsal pancreatic bud, whereas the lower part of the head and the unsmeared process are arising from the ventral pancreatic bud. So you can see in this figure, you can see the upper part of the head, the neck, body and tail from the dorsal pancreatic bud, whereas the lower part of the head and the unsmeared process is arising from the ventral pancreatic bud. What about the duct? The distal part of the duct of dorsal pancreatic bud. So these buds are having ducts. Okay. So the distal part of the duct of dorsal pancreatic bud, the anastomotic channel and the duct of the ventral pancreatic bud. These three join together to form the main pancreatic duct or the duct of Wilson. Okay. And the proximal region, the proximal part of the initial duct of dorsal pancreatic bud, that forms the accessory duct or the duct of Santorini. Okay, I hope you understood that the dorsal pancreatic bud gives rise to the upper part of the head of pancreas, neck, body and tail of pancreas, whereas the ventral pancreatic bud, that gives rise to the lower part of the head and the uncinate process, whereas the dorsal pancreatic duct, the distal portion of the dorsal pancreatic duct, the anastomotic channel and the ventral pancreatic duct together forms the main pancreatic duct, whereas the proximal portion of the dorsal pancreatic duct forms the accessory pancreatic duct. So that's all about the development in a nutshell. So now we see the arterial supply. The head, you can see many anastomotic arcades here. So it is supplied by anastomotic arcades between the superior and inferior pancreatic or duodenal arteries. Whereas the body and tail are supplied by the splenic artery, out of which one artery is very big, that is known as arteria pancreatica magna, that accompanies the main pancreatic duct. So it is arising from the splenic artery and it accompanies the main pancreatic duct. Now about the venous drainage, the veins from the pancreas drain into the splenic vein, superior mesenteric vein and the portal veins. The lymphatic drainage, the head and body drains into pyloric lymph nodes and pancreatic or splenic lymph nodes that in turn drain into the pre-aortic lymph nodes. Whereas the tail drains into splenic lymph nodes because it is opening to the spleen, you can say it is draining to the splenic lymph nodes. Now about the nerve supply. The mainly nerve supply, the sympathetic supply is by the ciliary plexus and the superior mesenteric plexus. The ciliary plexus is having both sympathetic and parasympathetic supply. The segmental innervation corresponds to T7 to T11. So in case of excruciating pancreatic pain, that radiates to the middle of the back and because of the irritation of the peritoneum that is covering the pancreas. So the pancreas is mainly retroperitoneal except the tail which lies in the lienorenal ligament. So because of that, because of the irritation of the peritoneum, the pain can radiate to the middle of the back. Now you have to know two radiological investigations related to pancreas. One is ERCP, that is endoscopic retrograde cholangiopancreatography, whereas MRCP is magnetic resonance cholangiopancreatography. In ERCP, you inject a dye or contrast dye into the ambulavator through the stomach and duodenum, and then visualize the duct and the branching pattern. And similarly, the MRCP is a non-invasive procedure. Similarly, the duct and branching patterns are studied. Now we see about the applied importance. You have got some congenital anomalies and also other applied aspects. The congenital anomalies, one is annular pancreas. So annular pancreas is that the pancreas, part of pancreas winds around the second part of duodenum, like an annulus. Okay, why does it happen so? It occurs when the ventral pancreatic bud splits into two, and one part winds posteriorly and joins in the dorsal pancreatic bud, whereas the other part joins anteriorly. So it will be covering like a ring. Next is pancreas divisum. The pancreas divisum, it is a condition in which the ducts fail to fuse. So in that condition, the body and tail drains into the minor duodenal papilla via the duct of the dorsal pancreatic bud, whereas the head drains into the major duodenal papilla via the duct of the ventral pancreatic bud. That is the failure of fusion of the two ducts of the pancreas. Next is ectopic pancreatic tissue. This tissue can migrate into some regions like greater omentum and Meckel's diverticulum. Next is the pancreatitis. Pancreatitis is inflammation of pancreas. So the patient will be having nausea, vomiting, then typical pancreatic backache that I have described because of the irritation of the parietal peritoneum. Then patient will be having fever, fat-filled stools. In case of recurrent pancreatitis, there will be stages of the pancreatic juice that can lead to calculi formation in the ducts of pancreas. Next is the pancreatic pseudocyst. We have already seen the anterior surface of the body is related to the stomach. Okay, so in between that you have got the lesser sac or the omental bursa. In case of any fluid collection in this omental bursa, that can appear like a cyst arising from the pancreas. So that is referred to as pancreatic pseudocyst. Next is the carcinoma of head of pancreas. So if it occurs, it can compress the nearby structure. So if it is compressing the portal vein, that can lead to ascites. If it is compressing the common bile duct, that can lead to obstructive jaundice. If it is compressing the duodenum, that can lead to intestinal obstruction. That's all about pancreas. We have discussed about the various parts, the relations of different parts. Then we have seen the pancreatic ducts, then microscopy, then the embryology, then the arterial supply, venous drainage, lymphatic drainage, nerve supply, radiological investigations, congenital anomalies, and other applied aspects. Now we'll answer the question that I have asked initially, that is, pancreas is known as a two-in-one gland. Why it is called so? So you have seen that pancreas, it is exocrine and endocrine gland. That is, exocrine part secretes enzymes like amylase, lipase, whereas the endocrine part secretes the insulin, glucagon. Next is, it has got two processes, that is Unsner process and the tuber omentale. Then we have seen it has got two buds, that is pancreatic buds, from where it is arising. That is, these are two endodermal buds. Then it has got two ducts, that is the main pancreatic duct of Wilson and accessory duct of Santorini. And then it is retroperitoneal as well as intraperitoneal. The major part is retroperitoneal, whereas the tail is intraperitoneal and lies within the lienorenal ligament. Now the pancreas is known as an unsung hero of human anatomy because it works throughout the day, that is 24/7. For maintaining our digestion and also controlling the blood sugar levels. And its shape is said to be a retort shaped or J shape or a hockey stick shape. So that's all about pancreas, and this pancreas is a very important essay question, and you have to learn all these portions in detail and draw these diagrams also. So I hope you have understood well. If you haven't subscribed this channel, please do subscribe and please press the bell icon to get more notifications.